statue.
Let's discuss. I have Harold Holzer with me here in New York. He's the director of Hunter College's Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute. He is also the author of a book on President Lincoln. Also with me, Alfred Brophy. He is a professor at the University of Alabama Law School. So welcome to both of you. And Harold, just going off of what the president just said, I mean, just being historically accurate and having a correct argument. You know, he's referencing General Lee, who led the Confederate Army in the Civil War to try to break apart the country versus the first and third presidents of the United States. Is that a valid argument? Should he be conflating those leaders?
Well, two words that you've been using a lot this week: false equivalency.
False equivalency.
The founders, especially the Southern founders, were flawed by our standards and by the standards of many at the time. They were slave owners, and the president is not incorrect that there has been some agitation in the last year or two about statues of Thomas Jefferson, particularly. Here in New York City, one of our elected officials, when she came into office, said, let's take the Jefferson out of City Hall Rotunda. So he's not off on that score, but what he's saying is that flawed people who still created the moral framework of our democracy and our system can be compared to traitors who led a war that killed 750,000 Americans, the equivalent of 10 or 12 million today, to protect slavery.
False equivalency from you. Al, to you, just why were these historic Confederate monuments erected in the first place?
Sure. Many of them were put up in the early part of the 20th century as memorials to the Confederacy. And I think that's the problem with them. But that's maybe also the reason why it's important in some ways to contextualize them, maybe keep them up, so that we remember that once the people in power in Charlottesville and elsewhere in the South celebrated the ideas of the Confederacy and of pro-slavery thought.
So here's someone who obviously entirely disagrees with these sorts of monuments and with the president, Killer Michael Render, who had this to say on Instagram.
I just don't want to look that stupid to the rest of the world, so please stop saying that stupid and at least have a argument that makes sense with all respect. Don't cheer for the team that was trying to break up the country that you're now in charge of leading. Their flags don't go up because they're losers. That simple.
All right, so Mike's feeling passionate, forgive some of the bleeps, but the point, Harold, is why cheer for the losing team? He doesn't want the U.S. to look, to quote him, stupid to the rest of the world. Is that a valid argument?
Absolutely, and the professor is right. These monuments, for the most part, although there were certain waves of their creation, were for the most part created as statements saying, we may have won the war, but we're going to win the peace. People of color are going to be kept in their place, at least the place we've defined for them, and these symbols of Confederate power, of white power, are going to stay in your face for as long as you live and your forebears live, ancestors. The problem is, there is another way to do it. We heard a second ago about contextualizing them. It may be too late. It may be too late for contextualization. Annapolis, Baltimore, taking down Confederate statues, including one of Roger Taney, who wrote the dreadful Dred Scott decision that declared that people of color could not be citizens of the United States. However, a few years ago, what the people of Annapolis did is erect a statue right next to Taney of Thurgood Marshall, who joined the Supreme Court that Roger Taney despoiled by giving that horrendous decision. So there is a way to have responding statues. In Richmond, the statues of Lee, Davis...
I keep thinking of Monument Avenue.
Yeah, Monument
Totally.
Avenue. And where does it end now? With Arthur Ashe in Monument Avenue. That was the reply to the... By the way, that's a real issue because Monument Avenue statues are great works of art, unlike some of the others that we're talking about. What do? Do you contextualize it? Do you
I keep thinking about
them?
Richmond. Yeah. No, it's a great point. I was also reading some of these. I think some of the cities where the statues are coming down are going to Confederate cemeteries, so they'll be placed somewhere. So if you do want to see them, you can go. It's just not right there in the middle of the city.
And the artistic problem with that is they are created to be seen from 70 feet below if they're in your face, they're going to look like cartoons. But, you know, maybe better than destroying them.
That's why I wanted to talk originally to the mayor of Richmond. We'll follow up. Harold, thank you so much. And Al, thank you as well on that. Coming up here on CNN, some New Yorkers say the president